Savings Forum. My name is Bill Dakin. I'm the moderator for the town, and we have 4 of our 5 candidates at the table. This is the forum for our candidates for select board. Before we get into it, let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So this is going to be an opportunity for questions to be asked of the candidates at the table. They will each have a question, the same question to respond to. They each will have 3 minutes to respond. And at the end of 3 minutes, we'll politely tell them to stop talking. There will be questions from the floor. I have a question that's been given to me already, and we hope to be finished by 8 o'clock or earlier. At the end of the questions, we're going to give each of the candidates 3 minutes or so to tell us why they think they should be elected, and that's how we're going to go. So we have at the table, we have Peter Hudkins on my far right. Ariana is here with us as well, and I say Ariana Knapp, Hugh Quinn, and Don Strohmeyer. So we will start, and Peter?
Yes.
You're up first.
Okay, so
Why do you want to serve on the Chester Select Board? That's the question for Peter.
Okay, so I've lived here most of my life. My father is involved in the town, and I'm not going to carry on for a real long time, but it's the mic now.
Hold the microphone.
It's working. All right. There we go. Okay, I've lived here most of my life, and my father was involved in public service here before me. I, too, feel that it's an obligation, if you're going to be in a small town, to be part of it and to be doing things for it. The constant in Chester right now is change. I feel the town is evolving, and I'd like to maintain the balance between its rural and the small town character. We have to keep working to keep the economy running, and we need to find balanced housing, because I don't think just low-income housing is going to work. I think you need to find a mix of low and regular housing, that they shouldn't be separated. I've served on the planning board, the development review board, the board of adjustment, an armory committee, a budget committee, and 2 building committees for the first firehouse, public safety building. I'm all set. You're up.
Ariana, why do you want to be on the select board?
I have lived in Vermont most of my life, and when I was in high school, learned a lot about Vermont government through Vermont State, and then went on to Vermont to represent Vermont at Girls Nation. And part of that, back when I was 15 years old, was recognizing and understanding that it's a citizen government here in Vermont, and that that's unique. And what I learned by going to Girls Nation is just how important it is to maintain this form of government. And so 40 years later, I find myself in a position to participate, finally. Something I've been expecting to do ever since I understood how local government worked. Right now, I would like to take a lot of the things that Peter just said are exactly why I'm here. The idea that change is constant, and that we need to look at how that change happens. And the idea that a select board can help carry that and hold that space for the whole community feels like the right way to approach it. And I want to be part of that. So I feel like the time has come.
Thank you. Hugh Quinn.
Thank you. I'm doing it for the money. No. But seriously, one of the many reasons that drew us to Chester was its relative small size. And what I mean by that is we came from a community of over 60,000. And in a town that big, it's very difficult. Thanks, Nancy. It's very difficult to feel like you can engage in a meaningful way in making change in a town that large. So, you know, obviously I feel it's very important to participate, right? This is not a spectator sport, so if you want to make a change, you have to engage, you have to get involved. Through the work I've done professionally and the work on the Planning Commission, I've pretty much established a reputation for being very transparent. I have a pretty good ability to distill a lot of information and sort through a lot of different points of view, and then provide a balanced recommendation based on all the information. So for those reasons, I think I've got some skills that would help, and I want to serve. Thanks.
Thank you. Don Strohmeyer.
And the question is,
Why do you want to serve on the Chester Select Board?
everything that's been said.
Yes, it's
No, actually, I have lived here for 37 years now and was a business owner here in Chester for 15 years. And I felt I have considerable financial and accounting experience, and I felt that it was time to offer that to the Select Board. I don't come in with any agenda. I like to approach things by using common sense and then my technical knowledge that I have.
Thank you. Ariana, we're going to take the second question and start with you. Ariana, what do you see as the biggest issue facing Chester, and how would you work to resolve it?
It would be hard to define the biggest issue facing Chester. I think response to change and a plan for the future is the biggest issue. Being able to move forward in a time where we are looking at energy legislation coming out of the state that's going to affect our residents. We're looking at housing requirements and housing initiatives coming out of the state that are going to affect our residents. And I think we need to engage in what's happening from the state level coming to us and find ways in which we make it right for Chester, best for Chester, ideal for Chester. Every town in Vermont is not the same, so how we respond to these initiatives that are coming down is important. I think it will be valuable to stick close to the town plan. One of the things I've thought of, two of the gentlemen up here with me have been part of that planning committee, and the town plan is a guideline for the select board to a certain extent, and what they've put together by dealing with members of the community to put that in to the town plan. I think what we need to do to address some of the biggest problems in Chester is work with the town plan and the community and the citizens to figure out what is the course. We need to look at the immediate needs, all the while keeping an eye on the horizon. So it's about looking at the impact of our decisions today, down the road, as well as how those can help people.
Thank you. Hugh, what do you see as the biggest issue facing Chester, and how would you work to resolve that issue?
Yeah, so when I thought about this question, it became, almost mind-boggling to try to figure out how would we, put your finger on the biggest thing. But when I think about the challenges facing Chester, I'm reminded of the TV skit of the person with the spinning plates and the poles, right? And his job is to try to figure out, how am I going to keep all these plates spinning without any of them falling on the floor? So that analogy sort of worked for me, because I imagined either the challenges or the issues, being all these spinning plates, and the impact of each issue affects the community differently depending who you are and where you are. So for some, it's affordable housing. For others, it's a living wage. Maybe somebody's got transportation as their biggest issue. Maybe it's, aging at home and living independently. Maybe it's, the shortage of workers, and, and the list goes on and on. So I feel like, one of the biggest issues facing Chester is there's an increasing number of plates, and our ability to keep them all spinning is something we need to reckon with. So when I think about that with a little more focus, I really think, for me, housing availability is top of mind, because being able to solve that problem will start to solve some other problems with respect to workforce, ability to live and work here and things like that. And so for me, I would work, the work we've done already to start increasing density, modify our bylaws, and make affordable housing development profitable is probably some things that I would be interested in pursuing. Thanks.
Thank you. Don, what do you see as the biggest issue facing the town of Chester, and how would you work to solve that problem?
Very difficult to say what is the one major issue facing the town. But if I'm forced to pick one, I'd have to say it's to make sure we do not drive people out of their homes and out of their businesses by taxes becoming, particularly property taxes, becoming far too expensive. So I would like to use my financial and accounting knowledge and common sense to make sure that we spend the tax dollars we do raise in a very prudent and frugal manner.
Thank you. Peter, what do you see as the biggest issue facing Chester, and what would you do to work to resolve that issue?
Okay, so for me, the biggest issue was housing. We were already seeing a population decline that's happening at the schools. And the thing is, when people look at Chester, they look at it and they say, oh, isn't that a pretty snow globe? If we don't have people that can live here, the pretty snow globe really doesn't exist. Housing affects every facet of the town. It affects our employees, it affects the fire department, police, people who volunteer. It's all affected by that. Climate change is coming along, and climate change and COVID have both been a problem with this. You see the increase in people coming in here, you see that the real estate prices start going up, it's forcing people out. We have an older population looking for smaller places to live. Chester needs to be where young families can move and grow, as well as a housing for teachers, craftsmen, professionals that sustain a town's economic base. It's the first thing that's going to keep us together. It kind of looks like not the big problem, but it just builds into it. It's like a spider web. The problem is not exclusively low-income housing. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen, and it comes from working in development in urban areas, is the fact that you don't now just make something exclusively low-income housing, that you make it kind of a multiple housing level so there's a mix of people, and then that kind of keeps it together. The short-term housing is also affecting us, and how we develop a balance with that, I really don't know. I do own a short-term rental, so I am on both sides here. The ordinance is going to cost me money to meet. That was the right ordinance to make, even though it's going to affect me. I will make decisions that cost me money if it's better for the town. I think a housing committee should be formed. It should be the town planner. Preston is unbelievable, and we really need to take advantage of it. You know, we need members of the planning and the select board as well as the public, and it's going to take a lot of time. It's going to take more than 2 Wednesdays a month to do it. Right now, I am really semi-retired, and I have enough time to put into it. And now when you start looking under that snow globe, the other thing that happens is we're looking at development is kind of limited. It's wild, excuse me. But this is up here, I really can't help it. This is a map that I had to develop because we don't have a sewer map. And what it does is it shows all the problems that we have with where the flooding is, that we're gonna have to, that's coming along. You know, there's a floodplain that the state could control, where the water is, where the sewer is. It's where the town can actually be developed. And we don't have as much room as people think. I really, town employees understand things, and it's really good to watch it, but I think we have to do it. Okay, I'm good, Bill. I do have an agenda item. It is housing.
Thank you. So, Hugh, is that somebody's telephone?
Yes.
Sounds good.
Nice tune.
So, Hugh, you saved by the phone, but if you would start off at question 3, if elected, how would you work to help the business community in Chester? How would you work to promote economic development in our town?
Yeah, so, as many probably already know, the Chester Planning Commission has already implemented a number of changes to the bylaws to try to make doing business in Chester easier, to lower the barrier to obtaining permits, and just generally trying to make Chester an easier place to do business. But I think there's really probably more that can be done. And what I'd like to believe is that we would, as a select board, take a more active role in actually making Chester a place that's perceived as, hey, if you want to do business, this is the place to come. You're gonna succeed. It's going to work, and it's not going to be that difficult. And so one of the things I was thinking about with respect to this question is, in addition to, traditional brick and mortar businesses, the hybrid work model and what's happened around the country as a result of COVID, where people can basically live anywhere and oftentimes and work, that's a huge opportunity to bring more people and more people that work into the community, because they're not bound by the physical location of a building, if you will. And so when I think about it that way, it would make sense to me to make some good investments in infrastructure. So let's have water and sewer and power. Let's have good communications and internet, so that if people are trying to come here to live but work remotely, it's a place that they can do that successfully.
Thank you. Donald, if elected, how would you work to help the business community in our town? And how would you work to promote economic development in Chester?
Well, first off, I don't think it's the select board's job to say and determine what business needs and wants. I think the best thing we can do is hear from the business community and be responsive to the issues that they bring forward. Again, I like to do more listening than I do talking, and I'll probably never use any of my 3 minutes. But I would like to commit, if I were elected, to going around and actually spending time with every business that I could locate and hear from the business owners what it is, the issues that concern them, and what they feel the town can do to support them, rather than us deciding that in isolation. Economic development, I majored in economics. I don't know what economic development is. It's two words that mean an awful, awful lot. I don't think we're looking for an IBM to come in here and put up a major plant. I think Hugh's right, talking about the hybrid work opportunities. I think we should do an awful lot more, and probably should have done 2 years ago, an awful lot more to promote the high-speed internet that we have available in a lot of places, to try and draw people from out of state who are interested in living a rural life and being able to telecommute or telework.
Thank you. Peter, if elected, how would you work to help the business community? And what would you do to promote economic development in our town?
All right, I am one of the founding members of the Chester Business Coalition, whose mission is to ensure that Chester maintains an environment attractive to business. And I think that's really crucial, and I thank Steve Mancuso for getting the ball rolling on that. The town should continue to work on revising its bylaws and keep working to forward the master plan. And we should be reviewing the master plan and keep working its way forward. I take a stand against overregulation. I don't think it's right. I did stand up in the last, there was a previous set of bylaws that were that they'd been working on for quite a while, and it was too much for the town of Chester. I do believe there's a legacy and adaptive reuse that we have now that is for uses that have previously existed that are not allowed in the district could now be allowed. And that's just, let's go. Adaptive reuse for a building. If we have a building that's in a zone that the building could be used, but it's not that use, we can now do that. We got that through the select board. I believe the state of Vermont says home occupation is a right. Now, one of the things right now in the town of Chester, any home occupation, if you're just having it at the kitchen table, now takes a permit. If you want to bring in the professionals and things like that, a professional office would be a start. We should make a list of things that just don't need a home occupation permit from the town. The business should be able to come in and do it. The first thing that happens is business starts at a kitchen table. If at the kitchen table, people sit there and say, well, we can't really talk about this because now it's a home occupation, we need a permit, it's got to go. You have to be able to initiate a business. I'm in favor of local control and a balance, and I've been a member of the Planning Commission, so I know where we are and what's going on. I believe the Planning Commission now is in a positive direction for the economy, and it should keep going there. And if I get elected, I'm going to continue to stay on the Planning Commission as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Ariana, if elected, how would you work to help the business community in Chester, and what would you do to promote economic development in our town?
Thank you. Helping existing business, I think there's two prongs here. The first is looking at the existing businesses in Chester, those that are bricks and mortar on Main Street, as well as the home businesses, and get a temperature of what the existing businesses are doing and what they need. And as Don mentioned, making sure we're listening to the business owners, listening to prospective business owners. But I do think we have two groups. The existing businesses need to be allowed to thrive and encouraged to thrive, and we need to make Chester a community that welcomes new businesses and encourages new businesses. I serve as the chairman of the Cannabis Commission, and for the past year, that's given me the opportunity to dig in and learn by talking with Preston and with Hugh and with others. The question I posed to Julie at the first meeting was, how does one start a new business in Chester? How does this work? Who are they going to call first? And all of a sudden, I had to learn all those things in order to better understand how we would welcome new cannabis businesses or respond to new businesses coming into town. So this last year, I've been able to spend some time trying to come up to speed. By no means do I have the expertise that Peter brings to the table on how housing and planning can be brought in. I really appreciate everything you're saying. I think it's fantastic, and what we need to do to expand on that, I think the master plan and our regulation, because it's 2023, these have to be living documents. We don't get to spend 3-4 years evaluating something, put the final period on it, and say, okay, we're done. We don't have to look at it for 5 more years. That's not realistic. So we need to continually be looking, because the world changes faster, regulations need to change faster, we need to be able to respond. If we have a unique, brand new business that wants to come into Chester, let's make sure that everything is created in a way that we can welcome that opportunity. Other things to consider, economic development. Economic development can mean a different thing if you're sitting at McLoman's having lunch than if you're down at the knitting store. Economic development just basically means the opportunity for more money. Do we want more money to go into the Chester accounts, or do we want more money to go into small businesses? Do we want residents to be more comfortable? All of those things are a piece of economic development. So I think it means maintaining an eye on the economy of Chester, which seems silly because we're a small town in a snow globe. The economy should be pretty simple. The fact is, it's different. Everyone out there has a different feeling about the economy and a different position in it. So economic development means everybody has an opportunity to enjoy more money or be a part of that and to thrive. Everybody deserves to thrive, not just exist.
Thank you. So the fourth question, and we will start with Donald. With the rising costs due to inflation and the municipal budget getting tighter, how would you balance community growth with neutralizing tax increases?
Wow. Who came up with that question?
That was Julie.
Go ahead, Don, I'm taking notes.
Exactly, we all are.
You go first, I'll take some notes.
Thanks. How would I balance?
How would you balance the,
Do I need to explain my thought process?
Please, thank you.
Please.
Well, you can start with me and go back.
Would that be helpful?
yes, please.
Okay. So my thought process in that question is with the municipal budget getting tighter and tighter and tighter, because we don't want to increase tax unnecessarily, but yet we have a community that has expectations and standards of growth and sustaining what we have. You know, they don't want the rec department shut down, they don't, you know. So how would you propose, or what would be your thought process behind balancing all of that?
Well, first off, I think you've done a fairly good job in the past year. Rather than growth, I like to think of it, you know, the residents are entitled to certain services. You know, we like to see the roads plowed on a night like tonight. We like to see a fire department be able to respond to the incident we had happen today. We like to have ambulance service. All of that costs money. I think, as I said on the previous question, in fact, the first one about why I would want to be on the select board, one of the things I'd want to do would be to add my financial and accounting background into that discussion, realizing that we have a limited amount that we can raise by taxes before we start chasing people out of their homes. Let's face it, for the most part, we're an aging community. I know I'm getting older, Mr. Collins is getting older. We like to stay in our homes. So there's limited resources there. So I want to make sure that we allocate those resources to provide the best service we can for the residents, to give them the services they demand and need.
Thank you. Peter?
All right, so one of my answers to this right off the bat is I was on the Armory Committee, and we had the opportunity to take that for the town or put it on the tax rolls. My answer to that is put it on the tax rolls. You know, we have example of things that are on the taxes right now. The Jeffrey Barn is an asset that's really a liability. There was a report that was done previously that said either you're going to support it or you're going to let it collapse. I think there's a third option, that you just need to put the barn on a separate piece of property and sell it. You want to save the barn? That's great. Let's put it on to someone else. We're going to have the liability of the barn one way or another. There's a problem that I have in looking at the capital plan, and the current capital plan really doesn't carry out projects that we know that are coming up that are showing. If you look at the capital plan or you look at the bond plan, it really doesn't carry out any farther than purchases in 2023. And then it looks by 2031 that suddenly we don't owe any money. And that is not the way it worked. When I worked in construction, we had what was called an indicated outcome report, that you put things in there even if it was hypothetical, so you understood what your expenses were going to be in the future. The town report does not really address putting the future expenses that we're going to see out there, so we're where we can be. I thank Julie and I thank the select board, because really coming up with what I figured about a 6% change raise in the tax rate, considering that in farming right now and buying equipment purchases, the inflation rate has been closer to 15. So to hold it for 6, they've done a really good job. And you also kind of have to think the balancing thing is really important, because how are we going to keep the best employees if we don't give a raise that matches what the inflation is, or even comes close. You know, when you look at it now and you go in the town garage, it used to be a lot of our town employees lived in Chester, and they don't anymore. It's about half. So, you know, you're back to the housing, you're back to trying to figure out how to balance this. You can't sacrifice it on their back. One of the ideas that I had said about short-term rentals was that, you know, the state's gold mine right now is the state is taking that home brew and meals tax and it's taking it back to Montpelier. If we're going to have a lot of short-term rentals in this town, which who knows how the balance should be, then that income should go to the town. That's what we need to support it. It's a way to get a tax revenue source that is not based on us. And why should the gold go all to the state? All right, thank you.
Thank you. Ariana?
This is my first opportunity to look out at everybody and frankly say, I need to learn more. So I saw the town budget for the first time 2 weeks ago. I'm comfortable reading budgets. I run million-dollar budgets for my job, but I need to learn more. I need to understand more. I thank you for your service and the time you've put into it, but your familiarity with what's going on has a lot to do with the committees you've served on and your engagement over the years, which is wonderful. So thank you for bringing that to the table. I will have to come up to speed on those specifics and details of what's in the budget and how long it rolls out. What I can say, money coming back to the town and not just going to Montpelier is one of the items we've also talked about in the past year regarding the new industry, the new cannabis industry, and the fact there's all that money going into the coffers. It's all going to Montpelier. None of it's coming to Chester specifically. I'm already engaged in trying to figure out who we have to talk to, who we appeal to, and how we get some legislation so that that pocket of money, which I am familiar with, we see how those funds can go back to the town from the state. And I think that's true in a lot of different categories. I also think right now, with the new affordable housing bills that were signed last week, there's a lot of money in Montpelier. So I think we also need to spend some time and energy as a select board, as the planning commission, as the DRB, as interested community members, learning what those ARPA funds are that are in Montpelier. For missing middle is a new word we're going to all start hearing, which is about the importance of developing housing that's middle class. So as Peter brought up, not just low-income housing, but finding a balanced development plan that's appealing and retains the zoning that we want in the community. So I need to learn more about specifically how we would balance the town budget. I can tell you, absolutely, residents need services. They need to know what to expect. We as a community need to understand that incremental change comes with incremental change to the tax rate. So if we suddenly explode in population, the way we balance the budget's going to change. Whatever comes through, we need to respond, and that is about being fluid and aware of changes.
Thank you. Hugh?
Yeah, so much like Ariana, I mean, I looked at the town annual report, I looked at the budget. It's a little bit daunting. I'm not a finance guy. But what I will say is I don't really think there's an easy button for this problem. With the current level of inflation, the ongoing supply chain issues, the war in Ukraine, I don't think it's really possible or prudent to assume we can neutralize the tax increases. Doing that would probably end up resulting in a situation where you would try to neutralize in year one, but if things didn't start to turn around in year two, you're just going to compound the problem by trying to keep taxes, net neutral. If I think about, how you might solve that problem just from a simplistic, how do we get more money in and how do we stop spending as much money? I think about things like, well, maybe we should figure out what we can do to improve, increase the grand list, right? Bring in more businesses, bring in more housing, create more tax revenue through businesses and new residents. Maybe there's another strategy for pursuing, state and federal grants that would bring more, grant money into the town that, and I know Julie does a great job, hunting down all those grants, but, it never hurts to, to double down on that if we can get, some grant money. I think The other thing we could do is possibly think about selectively selling some town assets. I know Peter mentioned the Jeffrey Barn, but if there are assets and property that it really doesn't make sense for Chester to own anymore, we should try to figure out if there's something we could do with those. A, to make the community better, but B, generate a little revenue for the town. As far as managing expenses, the only thing that came to the top of my mind was if we could defer non-critical capital expenditures, until the interest rates come down, then it doesn't, the cost of borrowing money isn't quite as hard. And then the other thing is, the town's been around for a long time. You would possibly want to optimize the processes and procedures, optimize the municipalities' processes and procedures to reduce cost and waste, right? There's probably things we do. They haven't been looked at in a long time. Thanks. They haven't been looked at in a long time. Maybe we look at some of these things and we figure out how to streamline them, save a little money, optimize the waste out of them. Thanks.
Thank you. So that is the end of the 4 questions that our panelists have had a chance, or candidates have had a chance to review. Now from the citizens, we are going to take some questions. And the first one comes from Tim Roper. And Tim Roper asks, what are your thoughts on the Declaration of Inclusion that the town recently adopted? And how would you have voted had you been on the select board at that time? So we're going to start, Peter.
Yep. One of the fortunate things, both unfortunate and fortunate, is the fact that you can't live, at the time that I grew up, having a job that lasted year-round in Chester didn't really work, and I had to travel. And I worked in a chemical plant in Birmingham, Alabama, and there you really got the sense of what this is about. And I would have definitely voted in favor of it, just because I have seen it. I don't see it as much. I do see it is in Chester, and it's like a festering wound, but in Birmingham, Alabama, it was life every day. So I would have voted yes.
Ariana.
I absolutely support it, not least of which because continuing to build cohesion with the whole state, part of what that statement of inclusion was about was having all the towns in the state do something similar. So it's a way in which I think we as a community, and then as the bigger community that is the state, can show our support for all. So I would have voted yes.
Thank you. Hugh.
Yeah, I definitely support the adoption of the Declaration of Inclusion. I think if anybody were to just sit down and read it, it's very hard, to take issue with any of what are in those words. It's very difficult to take issue with those. And so for me, I think of it as a guiding principle. It's something that the town should embrace. And it's always good for guiding principles to be kept top of mind as government goes about their business of running the town. So for those reasons, I definitely would have voted yes.
Thank you. Donald.
I find it difficult to even come to grips with and believe that this is controversial.
Yeah.
How could you not vote for it? How could you not be in agreement with it? That's all I have to say.
Thank you. So we will take questions from the audience, and I'll remind our candidates, as they're doing so well presently, that responses are limited to 3 minutes. After questions are finished, and we're going to be going for no more than, we'll say half an hour, but we'll see how it goes. Then the candidates will each have about 3 to 4 minutes to talk about what they want to say at the end. So I invite you, if you have a question you'd like to ask of the candidates, if you would raise your hand to be identified, then stand, state your name, and ask your question. Mr. Collins, what is your question?
He's introducing me.
I'll introduce Would you, Mrs. Collins, would you please stand up?
Yeah. Please, thank you.
Are we on Zoom?
SAPA is streaming.
Are we on SAPA? All right, so we're SAPA.
Oh,
So this,
okay.
you are who?
Gladys Collins, hi. Thank you. This has been great, so helpful. But I live on the outskirts of town, and I'm just curious what you know about the outskirts of town, some of the issues that are unique to us, and if elected, how you would go about addressing those.
So does the group of candidates understand the question? And Peter, since you went first the last time, we're going to continue with Ariana. If you'd like to.
Can you repeat it? We couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear it.
My question is, am I not close enough? Okay. My question is, on the outskirts of town, I wondered if any of the board members were aware of some of the unique issues there and what they would propose to address some of those if they were elected.
So the question is, if for those who live in the outskirts of town, there is a little different set of issues for living and matters that need to be addressed, and what would the candidates do to address any issues that those who lived outside of the village area, out in the more rural areas, might encounter? So Ariana, is your,
I was hoping I could take notes on Peter's answer.
so Ariana, where do you live?
I live on Matson Road,
So you live in
between
the
Mineral
outskirts of town.
Springs and the big road. There's 1 mile of mud between my house and pavement, no matter which route you take. So as far as the issues are concerned, I'm quite familiar with 14 inches of mud. There are weeks in March where my children can't visit me. So I would call that an issue, but I would also lightly, with some levity, call it part of a choice made by picking a house on a dirt road. So there are issues in the outskirts of town that I'm aware of which have to do with road maintenance, but also power goes out more often. It's issues with being rural, but then there's also the community issues of what's happening around in the environment. How much is the town leadership paying attention to what's happening on the roads on the outskirts of town? How would I address those issues? I will be interested, if elected, to learn more about what issues are specific to outside of the village. I can say, with pride, I have read the entire master plan, so I do understand that we have different segments of the community and how we approach those. And I'm a big fan of finding out how we're going to develop gassets and what are we going to do in that part of the community. So my answer is, I do live in the mud, and I look forward to learning more. I am deeply aware that what we're doing in the village does not necessarily apply out on Matson Road or Mineral Springs.
Thank you. Now, Hugh, before you answer, on what road do you live?
Who, me?
You.
I live in Gassets on Route 10.
So please proceed.
So, I'm pretty familiar with some of the issues out in the rural areas. I think at almost every meeting where a group of people get together, there's always discussions about, hey, we spend a lot of time talking about the issues in the village, but what are we doing about the rest of the town? This is a huge town, and it's not just what's in the village. So I'm sensitive to that because I don't live in the village, so I see the issues that are faced out in the rural areas with, speeding. I was a big supporter of the adoption of the salvage yard ordinance, so there are things that are unique to the rural areas that, quite frankly, when you're in the village, you don't see them, you don't think they exist, maybe they're not important. But obviously, because I live in Gassets on Route 10, they're important to me, and I would totally advocate for a better balance between what's happening in the rural areas along with what needs to be done in the village.
Thank you. Don, and on what road do you reside?
Main Street. Yeah, in all my years living in Chester, although I haven't always been in the village proper, I have been lucky enough to always live on a paved road. So I don't face the mud season. It's not that much of an issue to me directly. You know, the only issues I guess I'm really aware of regarding the remote or more remote areas would be mud season, you know, road issues, internet access, and power going on and off. But what I would like to do would actually be to hear what the issues are from people who live. Don't be afraid to come forward. I think we all realize that Chester it's a big geographic area for a town. And certainly we love the village part of it, but we also love the rural nature of it. And I'd love to hear if there are issues that we need to bring to light that are not being addressed. I'd really like to hear about them.
Thank you. Peter, and on what road do you reside?
Cemetery Road. I live in Smokeshire, so it's kind of separated.
I think you win.
Yeah, well, Smokeshire was also claimed by Cavendish and Ludlow, so we're kind of the outlier to everywhere. But that brings up, see that the last CDC meeting, there was a public service came, so there was the police department, the fire department, the ambulance. And the big thing that they were stressing in the rural districts was neighborhood. Know who your neighbors are. I have a barn dance every June. Lets me know who the neighbors are. I give a free hayride Thanksgiving morning, lets me know who the neighbors are. I know who the older neighbors are. I know whose chimney I should look at to see if there's smoke coming out, so they're gonna be all right. If I see smoke, I know they're up and out and about. These things are important, but there's other things that are coming around the bend. It's the state's open land. The state doesn't realize that, for instance, they talk about how they'd like 30% of the state to be open land. The state, between the state, the municipality, and the federal governments in the state of Vermont, they have 30% open land. What they do not count is they do not count current use. Current use controls a rural zoning that is not really seen and not recognized. The state would have, right now in the town of Chester, 50% of your rural land is in current use. So 50% of it is already protected by development. It's voluntarily protected by people who put their land in it on their own, that that zoning wasn't forced on it and it wasn't restricted. That's a big issue for people who own land out in the areas. It's 3 acre zoning now or 5 acre zoning. But with the current use, it's actually 25 acre zoning. Unless you take it out, there's a big penalty. So the open area will stay. So for me, mud, roads, if we're gonna reduce the amount of our carbon flow right now, if you really were paying attention this year, for instance, Smokeshire was graded 1 time less than it was last year. So already we've seen a reduction in road use, in road equipment use, which is a savings. It's a savings in diesel. It's a cost to the people who live there. Is it a service that we're probably going to give up? I think we probably should maybe even think about giving up more. But we have to pay attention to things like maintenance and ditches, because that's what's going to keep the road. Where is the water going, and the stormwater requirements. And then how much is the state going to tell us what we can do? And I think that's going to be the bigger issue. When I'm in favor of local control, and it's what the state control is going to do in the rural areas.
15 seconds.
Nope, I'm good.
Thank
Find
you.
out.
Other questions from the public? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Dakin.
are you,
I'm
sir?
Frank Kelly.
You are Frank Kelly.
I live on Crow Hill Road. And I am also chairperson of the Green Up Day Committee. So thank you for telling me where you live. I will be reaching out to you because now we have a greater database upon which to build our Green Up community. I'm also a member of the Chester Conservation committee. And my question for you is, you've talked a lot, and thank you so much for sharing your ideas about big government. Your community ideas, your neighborhood ideas, what can we do to enhance our community on a small level? What have you done personally to volunteer, and what other ways could we get more people involved so they don't all have these gray beards like I do, and we might get more community members involved like Scott? So that's it, and thank you. I will be in touch about Green Up Day. It's the first Saturday in May. There's a few hot spots that I will be reaching out to you about, so thank you in advance.
And the question is, what are we doing on a local level?
Yes, what have you done, or what are you doing to help our community now, and what are you looking forward to doing in the future, in addition to potentially serving on the select board? Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. Hugh, you can start that, please.
Okay, thanks, Frank. Well, I mean, I guess the first thing I'll share is back in 2020 when the pandemic broke out, there was this tiny little volunteer organization called Chester Helping Hands that got together and started thinking about, when all the restaurants got shut down and nobody could really do anything and everybody was on lockdown, how are we going to help the community? And so it was really a grassroots effort that got started between a couple of really dedicated folks that wanted to figure out how to help, and we got plugged into that and spent probably well over a year or so packaging meals, delivering meals, anybody that went through the green, every Wednesday. Scott Blair, I know you know all about this. It was happening right in front of your pie shop. So that was a great way to really see what was, happening, and the kinds of people that were, needing food, and the things they were up against. So I found that to be a very, rewarding for me personally, to start to get a better sense of, what this community is all about. And so I think the other thing is, we live in a small community, so I feel like it's important to try to get out, get to know people. The community has to be a life cycle, and so we don't want it to just be a town full of old gray hair, white guys like me. So we have to think about what we're going to do to get people, to transform the town so that families and young people and a whole diverse set of individuals are attracted to Chester. And I think that begins with just, understanding, what we are today and what we want to be in the future, and engaging the people that have the passion to make that happen.
Thank you. Donald.
I have actually worked on Green Up Day in years past, and it seems to me that every year that day would be one of the coldest days of spring. And when my body could no longer take that cold and bending down and picking stuff up is when I stopped doing it. I wish I still could. I could probably do it on Main Street, though. So look me up. I also have volunteered quite a bit over the last 35, 37 years in the Rotary Club, the Lions Club, the Chamber of Commerce. I currently serve as the treasurer of the Snowmobile Club, which we try and get families together, whether you're for or against snowmobiling, but our purpose is to try and get families together to enjoy the outdoors in the wintertime. Since we live here, we need to embrace winter as well, even though I don't like the cold anymore personally. So I certainly believe in a lot of smaller events to bring people together, like the senior suppers, the church. I love going to the church fairs, the church suppers, that type of thing. So.
Thank you. Other questions from the floor? Yes, sir.
What, I don't get to answer? You're
Yeah.
so picky, God.
We haven't answered yet.
I thought you've talked enough tonight.
Oh, okay.
Peter, forgive me, that's very unkind. First of all,
It's all right.
you're one of,
Tell you the truth, Frank has had my email address for, I think, at least the last couple decades. And I was actually on the first Green Up that there was. And it's kind of like doing laundry, you know? No matter how often you're there, you're still going to have to clean it up. And Smokeshear definitely has a drinking problem, and it's the natural light guy. You can tell exactly, you know, how many runs there are and where the cans are. We have it down to a science. So in volunteering for the community, that's the big thing that for me, I'm semi-retired right now, and I have enough time to put into this. And I volunteered for Eastern Paralyzed Vets out of New York City for 15 years. I was on the board of directors and volunteered for Vermont Adaptive Ski and Sports for close to 17 years. Chester, I belonged to the Grafton Fire Department at one time back in the 90s. I'm a little out of town for that right now. It was interesting because we were trying to have sleigh rides at the rec center, and I could have gotten back in the snow, and we had to clear some branches off. And I said, Matt, well, if you give me a couple of volunteers in about an hour, we could clear the trees off. And the answer from Matt was, I don't have any volunteers. And that's, you know, the collapse of volunteerism with COVID, somehow we have to get that back. I think Frank is absolutely right. I don't know how to do it, but I definitely think it's an issue. There you go.
thank you. I have to say that while we don't do this very often to have our candidates up here, say who?
I still didn't get to answer.
My gosh.
So I'll
I'm
be.
watching the clock.
I'll be
Can't-
brief. I'll be brief.
No, you've got 3 minutes.
No, I can be brief. I look forward to being semi-retired as soon as possible, but I am not yet semi-retired. So I am finding and making time, and I have met with my business partners and my family about the prospect of serving as a select board member because it means finding more time to do this as well as continue to engage in certain areas of the community. So I look forward to and have looked at volunteering at the library. I've worked with the Grafton Nature Museum for a number of years, and I've spent the last 10, 15 years on boards of directors of other nonprofit development. One thing I have decided to do, and made this decision again with my family and my business partners, is start bringing all that in. So because of my last 30 years of my career, I have engagements that have been in Boston, New York, LA, various places where I volunteer, and I've consciously committed to bring that all back home. And the areas I would look forward to are actually Green Up Day, finding the guy who drinks the natty ice and just,
Tried for years.
I don't know who it is, but I walk, and walking and getting to know members of the community. So engagement, getting to members of the community, I completely agree. There need to be more times, contra dances, whatever we can find the modern version of to gather people together. I think gathering is the greatest strength we have, especially if we don't agree.
Thank you. Hugh, do you want to go around again, or do you?
No, I'm good.
So are there additional questions from the floor? Yes, sir. Come on up and introduce yourself, Stephen.
Hi, good evening. Steve Mancuso. I have kind of a lighthearted question for you guys, and you can answer it in kind, okay? What is your vision of Chester down the road when it grows up?
So you heard the question. We're going to start with, who's next? The first person up.
I think it's Steve.
I think it's Don. It is Don.
It's Don.
So what's your vision of Chester and?
When it grows up.
My vision's not that good these days. Now, I really hope that we can continue to thrive, but yet I don't want to see the basic character of the village and town change that much. So I'd like to see us spend our energy in preserving what brought us here in the first place.
Thank you. Peter?
Okay, so I would really like to see a vibrant village. I really want to see the state is going to come down and take control of the floodplain. So we need to really get, it's so much of Chester and below Chester that we should keep all that open, but we should start to embrace the open land that's going to get hung on our neck. But, so if you look at it that way, you know, you need to look at it, we stay in a rural character. We're going to have home businesses that can work from there. Professional office would not have a permit. It should be vibrant. Things like, if you look, one of the things that works to Chester that you don't even realize is that Erskine's Feed Store stayed open.
Yes.
That has made a horrendous difference. So you want to see it kind of build on, we have the small specialty store like that, brings people into town and brings it across. So a vibrant downtown, I'd like to see a little more agriculture, embrace the open space, a little more hiking and things like that should open it up. I don't know, and I've never figured out, and no one since I've ever been here has ever figured out how to get a car to stop on 103 and buy things here. You know, the most successful thing seems to be the Jiffy Mart, but there is a trade that goes through this town that somehow we should splinter a little bit off. Thank you.
Ariana?
One of the things I'm looking forward to is the attention and the beauty of Main Street and the village. Some of that energy being put into Gassets and Depot and figuring out we've got all our charm doesn't have to be only on Main Street. I think there's room for us to develop these other areas as well, whether they are different or not than Main Street. I do think we aren't just about one 4-block stretch. I think there's growth and improvements to be found in various other areas that are very public. Gassets and Depot, everybody goes through them just as often as they go through Main Street. So I'd like to see those attended to consciously. And I think that the idea, I found out at a select board meeting 3 weeks ago that we have the most dirt roads per capita of any Vermont town. So I think as we grow up, I think we need to actually pay attention to times when we're making decisions out of nostalgia and times when we're looking ahead. I think there are certain modernizations that might help outlying parts of our community that we can look at as opposed to just being stuck in, oh, it's always been this way. So I'd like to see us move out of a fear of change while retaining who we are.
Thank you. Hugh?
Yeah, so I think I don't know if I've always said this, but I totally believe it. I don't really have to be the smartest guy in the room. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. So when I think about like my vision for Chester, I would much rather think about my vision probably is not nearly as good as the collective vision of the folks in the community, right? The people are here for a reason. So my ideal state would be to create an environment where people in the community, whether they're in the village or in the rural areas, feel comfortable engaging with government and shaping the future of Chester. So a place where people don't fear speaking out or feel that it doesn't matter, that they can't make a difference. So if we could create an environment where everybody was plugged in and felt passionate about what they felt was the vision for Chester, and we could harness that and then act on it, that would be my vision.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Good evening, Lee Gustafson. If elected to the select board, would you be willing to act or interact or interface with the state on a level to give a little bit of pushback regarding some of the regulations that are being required of the town that cost us money without the funding to go with it. Thank you.
Can you be more specific about which type of regulations? Just so we know what area we're in?
Well,
Or, I mean,
How
is
much
this
time
just?
do I have?
No, that's the point, Lee. That's the point. So can you pick one?
roads,
Great.
floodplains,
Are we willing to
housing.
push, so your question is, are we willing to push back on the state when their regulations are costing us money or dictating how we operate? And specifically, as an example, roads.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you folks understand the question?
Yep.
And let us start with Peter.
Okay, so right off the bat, there's Act 29, which the state of Vermont is coming down and saying, we are now going to take jurisdiction of your floodplain. They've decided that. You're not going to have any decision. We have a lot of, because we have zoning, we don't have quite as much Act 250 involvement, but Act 250 is killing us. There's a place we're trying to get gravel out of the town. That gravel has come out since before I went to high school. It's the same piece, the property hasn't changed. Act 250 says, no town, you can't do that. It's a legacy as far as I'm concerned. We've taken gravel out of there for 50, 60 years. State, nope. Act 250, we're controlling that. And when you talk about now, Chester allows multiple households in every part of town but the Forest District. The state is going to come and saying, because of developers, we should be able to dictate to the towns what is allowed. We have zoning, we've allowed more housing, it's not acted on. Well, why isn't it acted on? The wastewater permits from the state are so overwhelming, the state permits are so overwhelming that people don't build. Why are people going into short-term rentals? They're going into short-term rentals. Just last year, the state of Vermont added more inspection to long-term rentals. If you want long-term rentals, they have to be profitable. When you make a short-term rental more profitable than a long-term rental, it's economics. It will change. So yeah, I am more than willing to push back. I'm very much in favor of local control. I don't think you can paint with a big brush and say that this is what should happen in the whole state.
Thank you. Ariana?
Yes. If it doesn't make sense for the town, of course, we push back. There's no reason, Act 250 has an appeals process. There are local OJ, the judicial ordinance, whatever when they approve it or not. So yes, if we need to go in and fight back on Act 250 and go for an appeal, absolutely. As a potential select board member, what I will tell you is, yeah, I will take the time to educate myself. I will research. I will talk to people. I will read full binder reports when Julie sends them to the select board. And then I will do my best to bring my thoughts to it. But yes, if we need to push back, we push back.
Thank you. Hugh?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm always up for a good fight, but what I would probably say, just to kind of temper that a little bit, is I think when you're talking about going up to fight the state on something, you really also have to understand, what are the likely outcomes and how much is it going to cost the town to get the outcome they want. So there's a little bit of balancing, pick your battles, because you could end up in a situation where you've expended a lot of resources in the fight for an outcome that was probably had a low likelihood of being favorable. So I would just want that due diligence done as part of the process of engaging.
Thank you. Donald?
Obviously, if it's an issue that's going to negatively impact the town, we're going to push back. And one of the ways we do this is by the town talking to your elected representatives. But I want to make the point that it's not just the town's responsibility to push back. It's everybody's responsibility. Don't leave everything to the town to do for you. As citizens, we all have that responsibility.
Thank you. As there may not be any more questions, as I'm going to arbitrarily state, then I'm going to wrap this up by giving each of the candidates, and we'll start with Don, to just use 3 minutes or less of your time to tell us what you think and why we should vote for you. Donald?
Me? I'm first? First off, I appreciate everybody coming out on an evening like this to meet us. I think you see that you've got quite a few qualified and interested candidates. I would like to encourage everybody to vote. Please cast your votes. I'm interested in serving for the purpose of bringing just my common sense, my willingness to listen to people, and to be an arbiter. I have considerable, 35 plus years experience officiating both high school and college sports. I've learned to maintain a reasonable manner as a necessity, face criticism, hear comments, and make rulings. And that's what I would bring to the select board. Thank you.
Thanks. You.
Thanks. So again, I want to kind of echo Don's comment. You know, Julie and the town, thanks for setting this up. I think it's a great opportunity for us to share some ideas. So I think that's great. Hopefully you got a little sense of who we are. I think for me, I come into this with, I don't really have an agenda. There's nothing that I'm really trying to advance. My reasons for wanting to be on the select board are fairly straightforward. I believe it's, a duty to engage and try to make the place you work and live better. I'm committed to that. That's one of the reasons we're here in this small town rather than in a big 60,000 plus town. I think really at the end of the day, for most of my professional career, I've spent time basically problem solving, looking at situations, evaluating options, understanding everybody's point of view, so I'm open to all points of view. I don't go into any situation with a preconceived notion of what the outcome should be. And that allows me to basically listen more than I talk, provide a pretty good balanced perspective. And I think those are skills that are helpful, and I want to bring those skills to the town of Chester. Thanks.
Thank you. Ariana.
Thank you for being here. Please vote. That's the most important thing you can do. And it's been a pleasure this evening to get to know the gentleman up here with me. At this point, I'll be perfectly happy if any of us serve. I want to start by saying it's my hope that we are a community where people can buy a first home, where young people just out of college feel like this is a place they can come and put down roots. Right now, I believe it's pretty common to leave and come back, and have a lot of people coming back when they can slow down. And I'd like us to thrive in a way that makes people want to stay here and live through those 20s and 30s and 40s and raise their kids here. I also think, as far as business is concerned, I want to serve and be a part of this because I love to see the underdog survive and thrive. And we are a community that can create an environment that's appealing to new businesses, small businesses, home businesses, and I think it's important that people want to come here to start a business because they feel like the town will support them or they'll have a chance. So I believe in the underdog, and if we can make this a place where people want to come and try something, take a risk, come to Chester, start a business, buy a house, I think that would be ideal. I don't have an agenda, and a lot of people in my business have asked me why I'm doing this, and that was the first question of the evening. And I surprised myself, because the answer is because I think it's the right thing to do, and I think it's something I've felt was my responsibility for years. If I'm going to be a citizen in a community, I need to pay attention to the community and how it runs. I look forward to listening, learning, and living here every day, getting to know parts of it. Ever since, I told Julie that I was going to run, I've met 5, 6, 7, 8 new people every week, and I've learned more about Chester just in the last month, and I want to keep doing that. My husband and my children might not agree, but I'm really ready to say when I'm wrong, and I'm ready to dig in and research. So if something is in front of the select board and I need to learn about it so we can figure out where we want to go, then I'm totally ready to do that. And if I come into a discussion with an opinion, I'm also perfectly ready to change my mind by the time we walk out the door. I want to do it, and I'm ready. So I look forward to learning more about Chester, or sitting out there and learning more about Chester from you guys.
Ariana, thank you. Peter?
Well, I think the vote is probably the most important thing. It's the one true right we have in this country, and it's worth fighting for. Chester, the big thing is I want people to understand there is always a problem that comes across with me that I look down on people, and it's not. I firmly believe in doing the homework. One of the things that happens, and I listen to it, is we're going to open the packet and Julie will do it. You have to go out there and be willing to do the work, and it's a lot of work. I'm asking to step up. What they've talked about all along is you want to have young families. We're back to my major issue, which is housing, which is what's going to make the town vibrant. How can we have low-income housing? How can we have a middle-income housing? Those are things that we have to address now to get the town to continue to thrive. Without that, we're just going to get aged out and be second homes. And I look at Smokeshear right now, the Smokeshear population, so my neighborhood that I know really well, the full-time population has gone down. And that's how your community goes. If it's going to be people coming and buying and building $1 million houses, it's going to price out the real people. I am constantly, little things to look at. We were looking in the planning board just this last week, and one of the things we were saying was you couldn't live in an RV for more than 180 days. We have no passage now. And when you really think about that right now, every level of this government says we're having a housing crisis. Yet we are going to tell somebody who has an RV with their family and outside in it because they can't afford someplace else that you can't live there. It's really very difficult to be able to take that balance because you know that that's a family that wants to be in Chester. That's what's important for me is you have to make a base. We have to be able to have the young people stay here. If you're going to be on the select board, you're going to have to do the homework and do the work. And it's not obvious where things are. You have to dig. There's a lot that is lost in just basic history. There's an interesting conversation that goes back and forth with the library about the library funds. What's here? You know, that's set in this. Is it set in trust? No one really knows. The history is lost. There's a history of, there's public funds. What was their intention on the public funds? So don't look at me as the smartest guy in the room. I'm picking rocks in the same field my father did. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that concludes our presentation tonight, and we thank all of our candidates who've spoken. More importantly, we thank you folks. Thank you. Good job. So,
Thank you for doing this.
hey, thank you for doing it. Thanks all of you.
Oh.